Hello, everyone. We are looking at our second lesson in our leisure unit, and we're looking at sport for kind of ordinary and wealthy people. So we can go ahead and put our title down, Sport for the Lower and Upper Classes, our learning objective, what type of sport was popular for both rich and poor people. And our starter is to write numbers 1 to 6 on our sheets of paper for our quick fire questions. So please go ahead, pause the video now. Let's get the title, learning objective, and starter written down. When you're ready, you can go ahead and hit play and do your quick fire questions. We'll be taking them up at the end. So there were a couple quick fires in there that maybe we haven't looked at in quite some time, particularly the questions about the USA. So let's go ahead and take them up. Number one, what was the name of the man who started the Black Power movement? Often confused with the Black Panthers. Now remember, the Black Panthers were the very violent group. The Black Power movement, this was where you would make a fist, you would raise it in the air, and that was a way of showing solidarity with Black Americans in the 1960s. That was started by Stokely Carmichael. Number two, who is this man from the Elizabethan era? Of course, it's Francisco de Mendoza. Number three, who was charged with setting the Reichstag fire? Now, remember, the conviction wasn't exactly sound. He was held responsible, but in the early 2000s, I believe he was essentially acquitted of the crime and said that he was not, in fact, guilty. That's Marinus van der Lubbe. Number four, what was the name given to the law which allowed Hitler to make any rule that he wanted? Often we confuse these two together. We're looking for the Enabling Act. Now remember, Article 48 was for the president. The Enabling Act was for Hitler, for the chancellor. Number 4, what was the name of the plan given where the USA would give a significant sum of money to Eastern Europe? This was a way of encouraging these developing countries to become capitalist and avoid becoming communist. This is the Marshall Plan. And number 6, what was the name of the act that made Elizabeth the supreme governor? Now remember, supreme governor, act of supremacy. This is just a very quick reminder for you to make sure you have downloaded your leisure textbook. The link's been posted on a few occasions. You can find so by searching EDUCAUSE History, Entertainment, and Leisure textbook, or by using the link posted below. But make sure we're saving that into our favorites, or we're downloading a PDF copy onto our computers where possible, because we're going to be using this on a daily basis. So please make sure you have that downloaded. So let's go ahead and dive in. Let's get some keywords written down. So we'll have smock races, shinty, archery, and grappling. You can go ahead and pause the video now, try to match them up in your head, which ones go where. When you're ready, you can go ahead and hit play. We'll take them up and you can ensure that they're recorded down correctly. So let's have a look. Smock race. This was a running or a jumping contest where clothing was the prize for women, hence the word smock. So think of in art lessons, you would wear a smock to protect your clothing. A smock race was a contest where clothing was the prize. Shinty, a very early form of field hockey. Archery, we know from our Elizabethan unit, this was law to be practiced between the ages of 15 and 60, most often on a Sunday after church. And grappling, a form of team wrestling. So double check those, make sure you have them in the right spot. When you do, you can go ahead and hit play again and continue on. We've got 4 more keywords. We have jousting, pas d'armes, boot money, and melee. As a process before, pause the video, match them up as best you can in your head. When you're ready, you can go ahead and hit play. We'll take them up together and make sure they're written down in the right spot. So jousting. 2 opponents on horseback, they'll fight with lances. Now, a lance isn't a person. A lance is a long wooden pole that is designed to break. If you go into YouTube and you can just search jousting match, you'll see a few of these where the lances shatter. The goal is not to actually injure your opponent. The goal is for the lance to break and for you to gain points by shattering your lance or by striking the opposing jouster in a specific location on their shoulder. A pas d'armes, this is where a knight issues a proclamation saying, I will fight anyone. If you win, you'll win some money. Boot money, these are illegal or under the table payments made to athletes. These sometimes still happen today, but this was much more common sort of in the late 1800s where football was just starting to become professional sport. And the melee, knights will compete on horseback and in teams, just fighting each other in a field. This was most often done at a medieval tournament. People would come and pay to watch, and those participating in the melee, they would receive payment from the ticket sales. So have a look, make sure those are in the right spot. When you're ready, you can go ahead and hit play to continue. So it's always a good idea to set a little bit of context for the time period that we're studying, and the medieval era in sport is no different. So we need to know that sport was a favorite pastime of everyone, rich or poor. People like to play sport just like today. We like to go out and play sport with our friends. It makes us feel good. Exercise is good for our minds as well. And it's just nice to get out of the house. Wealthy people often had more free time to participate in sports and they didn't need to be working long hours. And this meant that poor people really only had Sundays after church to participate in sports. They might do a sporting event that takes place in the center of the village, or maybe they'd go to a larger event that was called a medieval tournament. Now, typically, sport for the wealthy was much more civilized and regulated. So things like shinty or lawn billiards, what we would call lawn bowling today, these were the wealthier sports. Uh, Poor sport often was a bit more cruel, so things like mob football, or even going and watching public executions. These were the activities that poor people would like. Now, why is that? Well, poor people lived very difficult lives, and they felt good about themselves when they watched cruel events take place. I need to imagine that you work from 6 a.m. until 7 p.m., 5 or 6 days a week. So your work week is about 55 to 66 hours a week, which is a lot of work. You live in a very, very cold, dimly lit, dark home. The floor is made of dirt. Your diet is awful. You're always cold. You're always sore. You're always tired. But going and watching a public execution will make you feel better because you'll realize that even though your life is pretty tough, the person being executed, their life is worse than yours. The same goes for cruel sport. It's a way to take out some of your aggression and the anger and frustration that you have on a daily basis. So playing a game of mob football, this was an opportunity to give a really good elbow to someone or to kick them really hard in the shin to get rid of some of the anger that you feel. So our first job today is to record the following two tables. You'll want them to be about 7 lines in length. So your first table is sport for ordinary people. Make it about 7 lines long. You'll need the 3 columns. So sport for ordinary people, examples, and why was it enjoyed. And then you'll need sport for upper classes, examples, and why was it enjoyed. And again, make it about 7 lines in length. Once these two tables are written down in your note, you can go ahead and hit play and you'll be listening to 2 readings. When you're done with those readings, you can go back to your table and fill them in as best you can.
Life for ordinary people in the medieval period was routine and monotonous and revolved around an agrarian calendar. People had to work hard from dawn until dusk just to survive. However, when they were able to rest from their labors, there were many festivals and opportunities to enjoy sports and pastimes that came to reflect a rich medieval peasant folk culture. In the Viking and Saxon eras, many social gatherings such as cattle markets and weddings offered an excuse for competitive games and contests. There would be an opportunity to bet on the outcome of the contest, and revelry and drunkenness added to the occasion. Commoners enjoyed sports such as throwing balls, horseshoes and hammers, shinty, an early form of hockey, and folk football. Football was an unbounded, unregulated game that pitted bachelors against the married men of a village, or sometimes one village against another. Scoring was a problem because there were sometimes no goalposts or even a ball, and their main aim seemed to be to inflict pain and injury on the opponents. This violent sport, though banned by Henry VIII, survived in Britain until the late 19th century. Running and jumping contests were very popular, and women were allowed to compete in smock races where the garment was the prize. Warriors honed their fighting skills by holding competitions using swords, spears and bows and arrows. Archery contests were popular because, according to the law, men between the ages of 15 and 60 had to develop their skills. Sports that were enjoyed by the lower classes were to evolve into royally sanctioned games and contests where the nobility were able to showcase their skills. The nobility of the medieval and Renaissance periods staged tournaments with pomp, fanfare and a real sense of occasion. At the joust, mounted knights would attempt to unseat their opponents with blunted lances. Other events included the Pas d'Armes or Passage of Arms tournament, where a knight would send out a proclamation that he would take on all challengers. The melee was a team event of knights fighting on foot or horseback. Early tournaments witnessed injury and sometimes death, but fatalities dropped as the tournament became more regulated. Such events allowed a knight to showcase his combative skills in the hope of gaining the patronage of a lord while impressing onlookers. They also provided knights with revenue, as the winner was awarded a prize or purse of money. Tournaments were not only training grounds for knights but also great entertainment for the local people. By the Renaissance period, tournaments had developed into elaborate displays of courtly life and pageantry, and very much determined by social class and rank. More sedate sports enjoyed by the upper class were real tennis, golf and lawn billiards.
So we've listened to the readings. Now's the time to fill in your table. So some examples of ordinary sport for ordinary people and for upper class sport. provide some examples and why people particularly enjoyed this. Feel free to rewind the video so you can pause it on the reading, have a quick scan through, and be able to write them down into your tables. And again, as always, when you're ready, you can go ahead and hit play. So we've done a fair bit of writing in our lesson today, so let's try a different approach. You're going to make a poster advertising an open jousting tournament in Berkshire in 1349. So your poster should give the reader the following bits of information. They'll need to know the date and the time of the event. Now keep in mind, people didn't have watches on their wrist, so the time might not be 1 p.m., it might be when the sun is at its highest in the sky. How are people going to register? So will they turn up on the day? Do they need to register in advance? What will people need to bring to the tournament? So if they're going to joust, what equipment will they require? And it will be an idea for you to use the image on the right-hand side. So they'll need a lance, they'll need some armor, they'll possibly need something to ride on a horse, they might need a shield and other items that are required for jousting. And you may want to also consider including the basic rules of the joust. Now, one last piece to consider is most people in the medieval era could not read. So although I know you're going to use some of this fancy text that you see here to make your poster look authentic, you'll want to try to use as many pictures as possible. And if we have a look over on the right-hand side, we can see very, very clearly that this is a poster about jousting. And even though we can't read the text because it's a bit fuzzy for us to read, we know this is about a jousting tournament. So go ahead and get started on your jousting poster. Remember to include the following criteria. So the date, time, how to sign up, what they'll need to bring, and the basic rules. Try to make it look as authentic as possible by using some interesting lettering. And remember, pictures are key. Most people could not read, so try to do so visually as much as possible.